Good evening. Welcome to the DragonCon Urban Fantasy Track, part of DragonCon Goes Virtual 2020. We're so glad you're joining us this evening for a fan panel on Lucifer. We're all excited to talk about this show. And I'm going to begin by having my wonderful panelists introduce themselves. And after that, I have some questions that I will be addressing to them. And we'll get some feedback from those of you who happen to be watching as well. So first off, I am going to start with Kevin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Batchelder. I am the Assistant Track Director here at the Urban Fantasy Track, and folks will know many of the podcasts that I do, including the Winona Earp podcast, Tales of the Black Badge, and the Tuning into Sci-Fi TV podcast, where we cover all the genre shows, including Lucifer.
Okay, Wendy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy Hembrock. I am one of the co-hosts of Tuning into Sci-Fi TV podcast, along with Kevin. And I've also been on some urban fantasy panels in the past for DragonCon, and very excited to be talking about Lucifer again with everybody.
Yay! We're glad you're back. Susan.
Hi, I am Susan Griffith. I work with my husband, Clay Griffith. We are the authors of the Vampire Empire series, the Crown and Key series. We've written for television with the Flash and Arrow series, various comic books, and we've got a new series out coming called The Monstrance soon. So we're very excited, and we love Lucifer, so we're excited to talk about it.
Wonderful. Now, is Clay going to be tuning in to watch?
He better be.
If he makes a comment, it'll be some kind of alias. We'll see. Okay, we'll see if we can figure out who it is.
Exactly.
Lisa.
Hi, my name is Lisa Harrison, and I am a writer for NiceGirlsTV.com. And Lucifer is one of the shows we cover. It's a huge hit on our site. We're big Lucy fans. I also write for thefairytalesite.com, or .net, sorry. And I am a voice actor for Garfield's Crossing as well. I'm excited to be here. I love talking Lucifer and being on panels with everyone. So I'm ready to dig in.
We will.
I know it. I just want to see your notes. I just want you to hold up that notebook. I miss seeing it in person, Carol.
Here it is. I'll show you the front cover. And it says, it even says Lucifer. So yeah, nice. It's right there. It's handy in case I need to. I've got, the questions are somewhere else, but the notebook is up there. So yes, it's handy. Jean Marie.
Hi. My name is Jean Marie Ward. I write fiction, nonfiction, and everything in between. And I've been a big fan of Lucifer since the start. And this is my second Lucifer panel with you, I believe.
Yes, I believe so. I think it was 2 years ago that you did one. Yes.
Yeah. So, really looking forward to this and hearing everybody else's thoughts.
Well, one of the things that occurred to me when I was looking through my notes and saw how many times that this whole idea occurred, and not even just the idea, but the actual words being used, is just the concept of powerlessness. How, Chloe feels powerless over her own actions or over her own life to a certain extent after Michael tells her, about her whole gift status and everything. And then when Lucifer loses his mojo, he talks about, he's worried about feeling powerless. And those two are kind of juxtaposed. But then even Ella is talking to the crazy serial killer that we don't know is a serial killer yet, boyfriend, that, having someone on her side kind of made her feel less powerless. So what I'd like to have you guys tell me is, what did you make of this? How did it impact the, the first half of the season for you? Just this whole idea of the concept of powerlessness. And Kevin, we'll start with you.
Well, I think it's interesting because much like when we talked about Winona Earp on one of our other panels, we're only halfway through the season. So,
right.
We're making some decisions or speculations, whatever, on the fact that we don't have the complete story yet. We're not sure where they're going to go with it. I think part of what they might be doing, certainly now that we're up to season 5, is that we've all, as viewers, gotten very comfortable with the characters, who's who has sway with who, and so forth. And I think this was a great way to kind of get us all grounded again, to realize that for a lot of them, those feelings, just like any of us in our regular lives, can just be sometimes if we lose some of our confidence, or we lose our ability to see the bigger picture. So it's been, I think, a nice way to remind us all that each of them needs to find what it is that makes them realize they do have control over their own lives, whether they be the devil himself, or Ella, or anyone in here. So I think for me, it's been fun to kind of see that I think is setting up what hopefully is going to be some epic stuff in the second half, where they're all going to really need to step up together. Because, I mean, maybe not related to this question, but so my notes on this first half were, while very entertaining and I'm loving it, I'm not feeling like the gang's all together yet. So
Right.
I'm curious where they go.
That's a good point. Yes, they haven't quite gelled quite yet. Although, yeah. Wendy.
I mean, the other people who are pretty powerless this season is a Menadil, right? He can't control time. He doesn't really know how to be a dad, and they're adjusting to that. I mean, it's the power, and it's also the vulnerability, and the recognition that power is not necessarily just granted, but it's given. It's definitely been a theme for the characters, you know, Lucifer and Chloe for sure, but Amenadiel has been one that's been really interesting to me this season. And then there's Maze, she's on her whole identity arc that's and none of the tools that she normally uses to feel powerful, you know, her aggression, it just doesn't work as she's trying to navigate this whole thing about, you know, what she's capable of. So yeah, it's been really interesting. For me, this season's also been a lot about punishment, which maybe we'll talk about.
Okay. Good. That interesting idea. Susan.
Yeah, I mean, I was really amazed with the ability for them to take these heavenly hosts, basically, who've got such, you know, godly powers, to bring them all down to the human level. So it isn't just the humans who are having this same crisis of powerlessness, but also the angels, and that they suddenly are getting even more of a taste of what it means to be human. That, you know, Amenadiel has to deal with a baby who, you know, and deal with all the father issues that he would have never, like babysitting and crying babies and diaper changing and having a sick child is incredibly powerful. And to see that, you know, with Lucifer losing his mojo, that suddenly he's now got to deal with, you know, Chloe's got it instead of him. These are all things that are bringing them all down onto a very level playing field, and to giving them a taste of what it really means to be human, perhaps. Right. I mean, we've touched on that in other episodes and other seasons, but here it's like the whole playing field's being leveled all at once, from Maze, who's dealing with mother issues and searching for her, you know, her ability to get a soul. That's, again, it brings them down to a very much human level versus being these, you know, these creatures of divinity or not.
Okay. Lisa.
For me, one thing this season, so far this season, that not only the sense of not having power, but just the emotion that has been displayed this season. I feel like we don't see everyone together, but I feel like individually we've gotten to see each character in their own vulnerability, if that makes sense. And the performances of all the actors this season have completely blown me away. But Lucifer and his mojo, and also him losing his mojo and dealing with that, I think makes all of the characters relatable. Like for new dads, they could relate to Amenadiel, and you know, for me, having the bad boy complex, you know, that Miss Lopez, as Lucifer calls her, that she deals with. I think a lot of women can relate to that as well. And I think there were just little things that were so relatable for each character this season. I felt like that was a strength because I was really just blown away by each of them dealing with their own issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jean Marie.
Okay, well, I've got a couple of thoughts on this. First of all, I think that the powerlessness, it was a direct lead up to the big reveal on the mid-season finale, because now we're going to really have some real power dynamics going on.
Mhm.
Right.
But not to give anything about that away, I think that the powerlessness is also engaging in a broader conversation with the zeitgeist, which that has been the thing about these first opening episodes of the 5th season that has really blown me away. You've got this level of powerlessness being threading through the various folks, as someone in the audience said, even Dan is feeling powerless.
Right.
The only person who doesn't seem to be really affected by this is Trixie, who I just noticed has brown eyes when both her parents have blue eyes. Whoa, what happened? Are we
Trixie
sure
grew
Chloe's the
up.
only? Yeah. But the thing was, I cannot help going back to two aspects of the season that have nothing to do with parenthood. Well, one of them does, but that makes it 3. Anyway, the Spanish Inquisition, for those of you who like Monty Python. But anyway, the first one was the engagement with Black Lives Matter that happened with Amenadiel's character earlier in the season, where he
Right.
befriends a young Black man who is unjustly accused and then slaughtered. Okay. And, how it makes him react to the humans, and only
That was last
Dr.
season.
Well,
talking
yeah,
about
but
Yeah.
I thought it was this one, but I watched them all binged. But anyway, the fact that his idea that, okay, Linda's willingness to sacrifice, to give up her power as a mother to safeguard the child, just as the Solomonic decision of, the mother is the one who doesn't want the baby cut in half and would be willing to give it up for the better of the child. That, that sensibility going on. But right, in this particular one, we've got all of the Celestials acting like 1%ers going, well, of course Maze, who happens to be a Black woman, can't have a soul. She's a devil. And it was sort of like this incredible reflection on what was happening with Amenadiel and the young man. And so, here they are complaining about being powerless. And even without his power, Amenadiel can fly. He can go forth to the Silver City. He can basically obliterate a building. Even without his mojo, Lucifer is this incredibly powerful human being who is part of the white 1% because he owns a nightclub that everybody will go to see, even without feeling that she is that, even without having all the toys of Lucifer. Michael is an equally powerful being. And after bemoaning all their respective powerlessness, they go over and look at Maze and go, well, of course you can't. You're a devil. And it was like, what a punch in the gut.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's poor Maze for sure. And we will talk some more about character arcs, but I want to go to what Wendy brought up about punishment, because I'd like to hear you expound on that a little bit, and how I'm just curious, because I hadn't really thought about that in terms of this season of what we've seen so far. I think in the past, but it didn't occur to me for this one. So I'm curious to what what you're thinking about here.
So we talked about this season on our main podcast last week, and one of the things that I noticed as the season wore on was some of my favorite characters were really getting beaten up, especially
Well, yeah,
when
there
they
is
were
that.
trying
Yeah.
to change, right? So notably Maze, she's trying to reconnect with her mother and is basically, the door is shut at every turn to her. And Ella has that element too. She thinks she finally found a good one. Turns out he's a serial killer.
Right.
And then Dan was the third character where, he thinks he's going to go to hell, right? Then he has this complete crisis when he sees Lucifer's real face and kind of goes a little bit crazy. And
As
then we
one
have
would.
actor,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then you have Linda, right, who thinks she's going to go to hell because she abandoned her baby, her first baby. And maybe the baby she has now, maybe something will happen because of that mistake in the past that she made. So that was what I was alluding to when I was talking about punishment. Which, normally that's Lucifer's job, right? Is to deliver punishment as part of his role as king of hell. And that was the other interesting part this season was, when he was in the hell loop in the first episode and the guy that he's supposed to be punishing is like, whose loop are we actually in? And are you talking to me? I'll be the detective, right?
Yes. Is this self-reflection, or are you looking at my stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then the whole thing with his brother's whole arrival, that arc, he's definitely there to deliver punishment, or I would say probably revenge, more likely. But so that was why I mentioned that to me, there's been a lot of punishment going on this season too.
Okay. Well, I'll buy that. And yes, some of it, is physical. I mean, as you were saying, literal physical punishment. And that does seem to be, that does seem to be happening to our folks. Now, the next aspect that I'd like to talk about is the whole idea of the vulnerability with, the fact that Lucifer wanted to feel vulnerable around Chloe, so that's why he was, and then now he's not. So now she's worried about, why is he no longer vulnerable? I mean, you'd think that you would be happy that the man you love couldn't die if he got shot. I mean, instead it bothers her, but it bothers her because of the fact that she thinks that it means that he no longer wants to be, but it doesn't. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean any of that. And so I'm just kind of curious how what was your impression of all this, and how did you kind of take that in the context of the show? And it's not just between Chloe and Lucifer. I mean, it does involve some of the other characters too. You brought up Ella, finally she's making the move to going from the bad boy to trying out a nice guy. And then we find out he's too nice. Which everybody, even in the chat, raise your hand if you knew there was something off with that guy, even the first time she met him. I mean, it was just because
it was too perfect.
Yeah,
he was too perfect. I was like, no, when it's too good to be true, it is. It's too good.
And from a storytelling standpoint, that if you introduce a character in a series at this point in the series, and number 5 was supposed to be the last season, but they've since renewed it for some more eps in number 6. That means one of two things. He or she, or they are going, whatever the character is, are going to die to give one of the lead characters human pain, or they are going to turn out to be a bad person in 2 or 3 episodes down the road. It's a trope of of episodic television. You don't introduce a new character in your last season unless you plan to get rid of them, or unless, as we all know, about the big reveal. So,
Right.
The OMG moment.
I know we all think we're great
Literally.
detectives, but we're really not.
Literally.
Well, now, Susan, what are your thoughts on the whole vulnerability aspect? I mean, was it something that you think is a significant part of the story, or?
I think it will be. I'm a little tired of using that particular element in the character of, especially with Lucifer, because we've had that play before, and I'd like it when it's more meaningful. So I'm curious to see where it goes, just to see if they hit it the right way this time. But it to me it was like, I was a little like, oh, here we go again with, okay, can you or can't you, are you or aren't you? It seems to be a little bit too flexible. I would like to see a little bit more solidity, a little bit more solid rules to that. So when they do break them, it's like more of a surprise versus, oh, it's just another trope. But given that, if it does play into the theme in the storyline going down the road, I'm all for it, because I have no problem using that kind of stuff in storytelling. But everybody sort of got that vulnerability. I mean, even from Maze, who is trying to go through her things, she became vulnerable. She became Ella to be vulnerable, and thinking maybe that might give her some grasp on something, which was a great episode, by the way.
That night laugh. She was in the
loved
bar.
That
Yeah,
episode.
It was hilarious.
I
but
loved it.
It was sad to some extent, because you're like,
Right.
know how desperate she is, that she's gonna go all the way to that to try and get to be vulnerable, to try and find that piece of her. And so you can definitely see that theme coming through, and I'm pretty sure that's why they were playing with that particular aspect of Lucifer again, was because it may come down to the wire at the end of the season. But in what way, I still don't know, especially now that we know what the big reveal was at the end, and I don't know if we can speak about it. I'm assuming everybody has watched it, and I feel
well,
bad.
yeah. Guess what, folks? Yeah.
Exactly. Buckle up, people.
Spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
8 episodes of the first half of the season. So yeah.
Yeah. So
anything in there.
yeah.
Lisa, what about you?
I tend to agree with Susan about Lucifer being vulnerable, because we have seen it before. But
Right.
for me, seeing Chloe be vulnerable, that was a little more interesting for me this season, because again, it was kind of relatable. If you're in a relationship with someone and they start to act different, like you start off dating and then they do something different, or they push away, and you're like, well, what did I do? Or what did he do? Or what's different? And that's kind of what she was doing, wondering why all of a sudden is he not being vulnerable with me, or why is he able to get shot and not die? And it's like you want to be like, well, you should be glad he didn't die, but
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
none of us have ever been. Well, we might think they were the devil, but I don't think any of us have ever been in a relationship with the devil. So I don't know how that would
Hope
go.
not. I was going to say, I know everybody here, but who knows?
Well, some of the exes, you might refer to them as the devil.
Right.
But I think that's a good point, though, in terms of the vulnerability. We all worry when someone we have formed an emotional connection to changes something. I remember how my husband freaked when I went to the hairdresser and got bangs. I mean, we're talking really at that level. And so here's Chloe. She realizes she is in a relationship with some kind of immensely powerful, immortal being, and suddenly he's not doing what he did before.
Right.
I'm sorry that I'm having sound issues. But the thing is, it wouldn't be quite so bad if Michael wasn't playing on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's true, but at the same time, it was right after that, she had just been told. Well, I think that he's, being vulnerable. He's vulnerable because he wants to be for you, and so then when that switches, I think it just takes her off balance too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and she has bangs too. So,
Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was as much as I love the show and I thought it was really just doing a great job early on, I was a little disappointed that as we are now this close to the end, that they found another reason to push Chloe and Lucifer apart.
Right.
Because I
Yeah.
thought they had done a really good job of finally, story-wise, getting to the point where it fit that they could be together. And now we're going to throw this in, and as was mentioned a few minutes ago, all it took was Michael, dropping a little bit of a "Are you really sure?" kind of thing in there, and that's going
Yeah.
to break all of her confidence in their
Right.
relationship. It was a little too simple. It's kind of like the whole thing with Ella's boyfriend. Yeah, we've all watched enough shows or know enough stories as to when a character comes in like that, not to fully trust it, but they pushed that so hard. They got so close, so fast. You knew, I mean, you just knew that was going to
Right.
go south. And that's for these writers, I was a little disappointed because I thought they'd been more complex and more layered than that. So both of those parts, kind of left me a little like, oh, okay, not the best approach, I thought, so far. But
Okay.
again, I don't want to judge it though, because again, we're only half a season. We got to see
Right.
what they're setting up to come back with. That might be just so kick butt that I don't worry about it once I've seen those 8.
That's right. You'll give up
Yeah.
your feeling.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Wendy,
depends a
what
little.
about you?
So actually, I kind of disagree about the Lucifer and Chloe thing, because they're at that point where one said they loved the person and the other one hasn't. So that you're on the knife edge right there, right? The power it's a teeter-totter. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what's been going on the last couple of episodes. One of the things I've really liked about this season and how Lucifer's navigated his own emotions, normally he'd be on the couch and sort of first in denial about what was wrong. Instead, he's busting into the house at all times, with whatever's going on with the baby, to sort of blurt out what's going on. But he's been way more engaged in like listening to the feedback. He actually, in the episode with the ex, where he and Dan work together and he's starting to really be a detective, and he's like, you actually read the case file.
Right.
and then it all pays off when he actually is the detective and kind of pals up with Ella to find Chloe and solve the crime, right? So so to me, there's been progress there from his standpoint. And if I were Chloe, I mean, I definitely can relate, because she just went through this whole thing about my whole purpose is to be your gift. And
Right.
people in relationships where it's like, who am I anymore? I mean, that was the whole episode about our Mojo and them sort of trying to negotiate who's in charge, or who has the mojo. It's like a ball they were tossing around in some ways. And it felt like when they came out of that, and then when they actually found Chloe when she was being held in the zoo of all places, the abandoned zoo. Not sure what that metaphor was for with the zoo, but that they were just, literally he's about to say he loves her when time stops. And it's unclear to me whether that was Amenadiel having a crisis about his baby, or if that was God arriving and saying, whoa, time out, literal time out. So I'm okay with how they've actually handled the on again, off again, shaky ice that Chloe and Lucifer are in. It can't stay this way.
No,
it does need to settle, but I'm okay with it for now.
I agree with both of you, because I don't like that trope where people just are kept apart all the time when that they're supposed to be together, when there are manufactured reasons. So I'm with Kevin on that, but then I'm also with you, Wendy, on the aspect that it's given their situations, given what Chloe just found out about herself, and then Lucifer losing some of what what makes him special and of use to her, and just not understanding where that all comes from, given their relative positions. I think it makes sense, but I do agree that it can't go on. I mean, it just can't last forever. And along with that whole thing about talking about Lucifer and him doing some of the detective work, when he's talking to Amenadiel, and this was one of the things I wrote down just because I thought it was so significant, that after Chloe's taken, when they know she's been taken, and he says, "I'm useless without her. How am I going to find her without her?" And, at that point, that's when, Amenadiel says, "Well, how about Detective Morningstar? You have learned all this stuff, so go for it." And he has to kick in and, really step up. But the next thing I'd like to talk about is the whole idea of desires versus fears, because you've got these twin brothers. So, some of that conventional wisdom or folklore kind of thing is two sides of the same coin kind of thing. But if you've got somebody who can wrest your desires from you and someone who can play upon your worst fears, do we see that as being a significant portion of what's going on in the power play between the brothers, and therefore will affect what goes on with everybody else in the show? And Lisa, we'll start with you.
Well, first, I do want to say this: Michael and Lucifer, Tom Ellis did such a great job playing both. In the scenes with Michael and Lucifer, especially the fight scene, Michael's voice and his accent, I couldn't believe it. It was, you totally believed it was two different characters.
Well, he even had like the hunch and the shoulder.
I know.
It's the whole body thing as well.
He did such a good job. I honestly think he should be nominated for an Emmy this season. But what I was going to say is, as far as the power struggle with Michael, I think if Chloe was out of the picture, I don't think him being so manipulative to get inside people's fears, I don't think it would be as big of a deal. But because it affects Chloe, I think it affects Lucifer more. And I think that's where it lies between the two brothers there. If we took Chloe out of it, I don't think Michael could affect Lucifer as much as he does now.
Except remember that he also told Lucifer that he's the reason that he was the one who planted the whole idea of rebelling against God in his in his mind in the first place. So now Lucifer's doubting himself. It's like the thing that has made him him, and his pride.
That's true.
So
that's a good point.
He's he's not a good guy, that Michael.
No, he's not. I hated Michael. I just wanted to come through the screen and just, he was terrible.
Yeah.
In the caves.
Yeah.
Jean Marie, what about you?
Well, I think that Michael's goal, from a story standpoint, is obviously to get all the toys that Lucifer has. He's tired of being the smiter and being the good brother, and oh God, find two brothers and you'll always get one going, Mom likes you best. Well, I'm the one that's the good brother, and they go at it like, yeah, they never outgrow it. If they have that conflict, they will never outgrow it. But the thing is that I think that if Chloe wasn't in the picture, Michael would have to find someone to do that, to basically undercut Lucifer at every level. You're seeing this in terms of him going, well, it wasn't really your idea, because he has twigged onto the fact that Lucifer's greatest fear and his greatest desire is that he stands apart from God. Well, it's a reflection of Chloe being, what if I'm just a gift? What if I am just a way that God is playing out some sick little game of themselves, why I suddenly am less of a person if I am just the result of God's intent and Michael's whisper. So you get you get a reflection of the whole Chloe thing in that dynamic. But I do think that if Chloe weren't there, Michael would just find something else. And I also think that the desire fear thing is a really good, really natural juxtaposition of opposites. And a good one to play with in this context. I really do think it's a good one.
Great. Thank you. Kevin.
The thing I haven't been as comfortable with that, though, is usually when we see Lucifer using that power, it's very brief. The person goes into a little bit of a trance and blurts out an answer and then immediately comes back to normal. The thing that's been happening with Michael is he brings this up, and then that person has appeared to be very devastated for a longer period of time. So I don't like that it doesn't feel balanced.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's kind of an incomplete thought myself yet on maybe we need to see more this season in it. But that's why it's almost like being the fan of Lucifer and not Michael, as we've all discussed, because we hate what he's doing. It's like I want Lucifer to be able to use his power to get more to balance against Michael.
Well, you got to also think that desire isn't as terrifying to a human as a fear is. A fear is longer lasting. That's more affecting and will consume a person. If you just say, I desire, something, it's not, it's a want, but it's not a thing that's going to cast you down into despair. And unless, you're never going to be able to obtain it. But that's not what the point of the desire is when he asks that question. It's more of, what do you desire? Well, I desire to be a movie star. I desire to open a shop in Long Island. But when Michael uses it, it's much more devastating. It's very personal. It makes people start doubting themselves in a way that the desire could never do. So in some ways, Michael's power is more powerful in some ways than Lucifer's. Lucifer just uses a desire so he can forge a path and get some little twist in there to torture somebody if he had to. But Michael's power is right to the root and right to the heart, and humans really have no power against it unless you're really incredibly strong-willed.
Right.
Well said.
So does this give us a chance going through the season for Michael to maybe realize this and realize he has more power in this situation than Lucifer, and therefore this causes Lucifer to have to go to the team a little more in this battle coming forward?
Maybe.
Yeah. Wendy, what about?
Well, and now that the big reveal, and we've got so and so, the big guy coming down. What is his point on all this? What's he thinking about? These are all his children to some extent, and he knows everything. He knows what everybody's been doing. So it'd be really interesting to see what the next phase is. Because he's got to have had a plan. You think maybe he hasn't. We don't know, but he's also been aware of what Michael's been doing, what Lucifer's been doing, and I'm curious to see where that's all going to come out at the end.
We're going to get to that.
Wendy, the OMG moment.
Exactly, literally.
Yeah.
Wendy, what about you?
I just wanted to add that the whole thing about your fear, right there, that's your own self-judgment that you're carrying, right? What you desire, there's usually a level of judgment there too, but it's more about your aspiration being beyond maybe where you really are versus your fears. That's all the negative element of people's egos. So that to me, it makes sense that those linger, and because they're planting doubt. That's what it is. It's your self-doubt is very much tied to the fear. So that works for me. I'm going to be very curious what Dad has to say about Michael, because if he's omniscient, he knows what he's doing and what this plan is, and in some way must be willing to either let the rope out enough for him to hoist himself, or in some way thinks humans deserve whatever he's about to lay down. Oh, he
Well,
being
and there's
Michael.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just
Sure.
meant he being what Michael had, you know, is there some element where he agrees with whatever Michael's planning to do?
Right. Well, there is a point at which Amenadiel, when he first comes back from his short stint taking over for Lucifer, um, when he says something about Michael having Dad's ear, but he doesn't go any further about that, so we don't know exactly what that means. I would like to share this comment that we've got here, but from Rachel, that not thinking about it before, but people tell Lucifer their desires. He has to kind of draw it out of them. But Michael seems to just know their fears without he somehow knows these things without having to ask. And that makes him probably a little bit I think it makes him a lot more dangerous, but
Yeah.
that was a good point, Rachel, so thank you. And there's also another comment here about it does make me wonder why Michael hates Lucifer so much. Could it be that Michael's expressing his own fear of being insignificant? And that's very possible, because yeah, I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, even just looking at, they might look the same, but yeah, Lucifer's got something that Michael does not. I mean, just in terms of their personalities and everything. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about is the character arcs. And again, as Kevin has pointed out a few times, and it's well worth bearing in mind that this is only half of the season. However, they broke it in half on purpose. It wasn't as though they had to quit, and they've already filmed the whole thing. It was done, but it was supposed to be done in 2 parts. So they must have broken it off there for a reason, meaning, because, Dad showed up. But I'm curious if there were some character arcs that you saw that maybe, within these first 8 episodes, that maybe were a continuation of something that occurred before, or if it's something new. But is there one that you particularly like, or something that you particularly don't like and aren't on board with completely? And Jean Marie, we'll start with you this time.
Well, like I said, I was really impressed at the way that they were connecting with the zeitgeist and carrying the thread of injustice at so many levels. The injustice of the earthly injustice, then the celestial injustice of what's happening to Maze, and the injustice of being a gift. You're not a human, you're just a thing to be passed around, like Eve was pulled out of Adam's rib and passed around. And so that's been really, really resonating with me. However, I do want to say on a completely different thing of what is with the hunched shoulder of Michael? We haven't had that explained yet. And I'm dying to know what is about that.
Yeah.
Because his body language is great, but I got to say, I did not buy the American accent. Not a bit.
It was
actually
a weird
went-
accent, for sure.
Well, it seemed as though by the last episode that
It
it was
settled down.
taking on it seemed as though initially it was kind of a it didn't have a specific accent in terms of area of the country, but it seemed as though by the last episode he was sounding a bit more that he was coming from, I don't know, somewhere in the Northeast, I think. So
Yeah, well, I
I
actually
just thought it
went
was
and,
odd because it changed, is all I'm saying.
yeah. I actually went and did research because I was going, there has to be something to do with his arm. Was he wounded? What was the whole deal with? And I went and started doing research on the Archangel because I'm like completely zeroed in on that, because there had to have been some reason why he chose that rather than just to be, it could be an actor's choice, of course, there's no doubt about that, but I keep thinking that they've thought these things through a little bit more clearly, so I couldn't find any reference to it. But I'm wondering if maybe there is something that we'll learn that might be the reason why Michael has such a hatred for Lucifer, that maybe there is something there, that maybe he is got some sort of deformity or some sort of, wound or something. But I mean, I was surprised at the accent change. I thought it was. I would have rather have had it not had that, and I didn't even want the scar because I always wanted that shred of doubt that who are we really dealing
good
with?
point.
Yeah.
And it became too easy for the viewer to figure out who were
Which one was which? Yeah.
exactly.
It's the identifying quality. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Kevin, what about you? Any character arcs that are specifically
Well,
of
I've got
interest or lack thereof?
again half a season's worth so far.
Right.
I have two that are standing out, one in a good way, one in a bad way. The positive one is I'm liking what they're doing with Linda. We're getting more background on her, the concern about her first child. She doesn't get a ton of screen time yet, but again, it's important with the baby, with Amenadiel. I'm very much enjoying that. The Maze stuff worries me a little.
Yeah.
I mean, she's been just the fun, kooky, crazy demon that we'd love to see what she's going to do next. So I get that they want to maybe give some more depth to her, but this seemed just a little too, I don't know, her buying in, as someone mentioned in the comics, to Michael's idea of getting her a soul in the course of like one conversation after all of the problems she's had with him.
Right. Yeah.
Seemed a little too easy there. So that's a little bit of the concern. I mean, I really think the actress is doing a wonderful job, and watching what happened with her mother and all. I mean, that's given us depth, but it was just a little too quick turn to not that she hasn't always had issues with Lucifer and always,
Right.
but I don't know, that part seems, but again, I don't want to judge it. Again, this could just be a stepping stone to more of a breakthrough in the next couple of episodes, but I'm a little concerned with where Maze might be going.
I agree with you personally, just because I have had issues with her character arc in the past, and I am worried about it too, or concerned. Let's put it that way. Wendy.
Yeah.
Chloe and Lucifer's arcs overall, I'm fine with. I've been really enjoying those. I'm curious where we're going with Ella. I really don't want her to be the big bad in the second half of the season. They had her be the crime boss in the black and white episode. She hooks up with the crime boss. She's talked about how she was, comes from this terrible family. If this boyfriend is going to send her, to the dark side in the next half of the season. I'm fine if she kind of goes off into a period of self-doubt, but it would be really disappointing if she either entered the convent or entered crime. As those two extremes, right? The Maze arc, I'm willing to give them a little bit more leeway on. Because I do feel like Maze is a volatile character. So it was disappointing that she flipped a switch to Michael, but it didn't seem that unbelievable, especially because of the grief of not necessarily losing her mother, but losing that opportunity to get to have any conversation with her before she was gone. And there's still all that lingering Eve pain that hasn't been reconciled. The other character whose arc I really like is Amenadiel, because he really has stepped up as a father figure, for Maze, as well as Lucifer. He's really his best friend kind of this season.
Well, that's a good point. Yes, when you think back, I actually, during one of the episodes this season, I was remembering back to the first few in the first season, and that he's this just this image of judgment when he shows up. And every time he would show up, you're like, oh God, what's he going to do to Lucifer this time? Or what's he going to tell Lucifer he needs to do this time, or whatever. So that's been kind of cool to see. I agree. Susan.
I've actually been a little bit concerned with Dan.
Yeah.
This year, I thought it went a little off the rails in the beginning with the whole, new age kind of thing. It was just too quick a turnaround for his character, the way they've been developing it over the course of the past seasons. And yeah, I mean, I get that he's going through a lot of grief, and that there is some, when you go through that kind of stage, that there is some major change personality wise occasionally that will hopefully revert back. But I'm a little leery of that one. I'm liking the Maze story a lot, though I too have a couple of reservations on it. But I'm just didn't want them to have to give her a soul. I don't want her to have a soul, but I like the concept of her wanting a soul. That I think, because everybody else has got one and everybody's really happy, and I'm a demon and I'm never going to have that happiness. Why is that? But I think at base heart, she's not Spike. She's not Angel. She shouldn't have a soul. She's a demon. She should, this is who she is, and she needs to accept that. But I like, I like aspects of it. I'm just a little leery of how far she'll go. I don't want her to betray Lucifer or anything based on that, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And one of the things that, during the episode when she tells, I forget which character it is she's talking to, that she's Linda, I guess. And she says, well, you can't have a soulmate if you don't have a soul. When Linda tells her, well, someday you'll find your soulmate. And my husband happened to be watching that episode with me, and I just looked at him and I said, well, it seems to me as if it bothers her so much that she must have one, or she must have some equivalent of a soul. Otherwise, why would she give a rat's rear end that she doesn't have one? I mean, to me, that was just an interesting thing for, to think about when she said that. Lisa.
I tend to agree with you guys about Maze. For me, it was the whole, up until she flipped, Maze, that character arc for me was like one of my favorites this season until that part. I loved learning more about her and seeing her and meeting Lilith and seeing her mother and seeing her vulnerability. It was heartbreaking after her mother died. And when she had the scene with Linda talking about, basically just, not to quote her, but she was basically saying, give her the choice, give your first daughter the choice to meet you. And then when she broke down about her mom not being there, I just thought, wow, here's this demon that we've seen, this kick-ass, strong female of color that you would never think we would see in a vulnerable moment. And here she is in one of the most vulnerable moments that you can have, right? Losing your mother. And her arc was great to me up until the Michael, when she switched and went with Michael. I just thought, oh my God, I got nervous. It made me nervous as well. And I kind of think part of it was also a revenge to Lucifer, because I think she's still mad at Lucifer for leaving her and going to hell without her.
Right.
So I think it was kind of like a kick in the pants to Lucifer as well. It wasn't just to get, to go with Michael because he's going to give her a soul. But I couldn't believe she trusted him, that part kind of. And then the other thing that I loved was, and I do want more of, and a couple of people in the comments have completely read my mind, is I want more Trixie. I miss Trixie. I love the relationship with Lucifer and Trixie. And the I don't know if it's the black and white episode.
Yeah.
I loved that he was telling her the story, and it was cute, but we didn't really get to see them. I want more Trixie. So that was something I'd like to see more in the second half of the season.
Yeah, so, and I agree. I mean, Trixie's always fun, but then there's somebody else in the comments had said something about and it was, I'm saying this in relation to what you had just said, Lisa, that it's almost as though maybe Maze is not turning away or not turning to Michael so much as turning away from Lucifer because of what he's done. And yet, when push comes to shove, in the end, she always ends up, gravitating back, towards
Yeah.
him, I think. So we've got a little bit of time left, but what I would like to do is talk about what do we see as being some of the things that we feel will get covered in this second half. Is it going to be, like, for example, we've got some things that haven't been explained yet. When Amenadiel comes back and says, well, yeah, I got to come back because Dad says hell doesn't need a warden anymore. So what's going on there? What is
Yeah.
Michael's grand plan? And somebody else, one of the panelists brought up, was it who really stopped time? Was that Daddy, or was that, they thought that maybe it was Amenadiel's powers returning because he was so upset. But what do you see as being some of the things that you feel are some of the most important that get wrapped up in? And Wendy, I believe it's your turn to go first. So,
well, I mean, I want to know why God is intervening now.
Right.
So, like, how is that tied to either Michael's plot? I'll just call it Michael's plot. And we were talking earlier about his deformity, and when I saw that, I immediately thought of Richard III.
Yeah.
And they haven't made any specific comment about that, but that was always my sort of view of Michael and his. And all the Celestials are sort of engaged in a Shakespearean type melodrama. But
good point.
I'm more interested actually in, is there an end game that Lucifer can stay on Earth? Or, I mean, is that the point? Is the point, instead of having this separation, Lucifer's in hell, that's your job, angels stay in heaven, they don't intercede on Earth. Demons are just these beings of, I'll call it id.
Right.
And humans are consumed in their own stuff. It is the point that we're going to engage with each other? Is it that everybody's going to lose some of their power or shift power in order to coexist? I mean, I don't really know. I've never read the comics, so I don't know what the focus is in the comics. But certainly thinking about the show previously about how it might end at any time, I would really like everyone to know who Lucifer is, including Ella, who's kind of the only one who doesn't at this point.
Yeah, at this point.
Yeah.
And sort of, and then, some resolution to how can Chloe and Lucifer sustain a relationship, and it, I don't know how they do it. I mean, he's immortal. What happens to her? Does she have any powers? There was that joke when she was talking to Amenadiel, do I have any superpowers? And
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
We don't know. I still don't know whether she does or not. So all of my questions are about sort of where do we leave these characters that I've become really attached to, and sort of in the bigger universe, what's sort of the state of the world when they finally, shut the door.
Okay. Susan.
It's interesting because if they've been dealing with the theme of fate and whether Chloe is, God's gift, and that everybody has a position or a plan, and that this plan has been in play the entire time, how does that all get resolved now that God's made the appearance? Why, like when you say, why is he coming down now? There has to have been a valid reason. So whether it's, it's not just because Michael's down there. If it is, I'd be a little bit disappointed if it's just because Michael's
He had
down
to go
there. Or,
Yeah.
Right. If all the things that have been going on over all the seasons, that can't be the only catalyst to bring God down to earth, that there has to be something larger in play. And whether it is something that's in play that God himself has initiated, and that could be that, whether it's human free will, whether it's, Chloe is a gift from God to please Lucifer. Those are little things that have been throughout the entire 5 seasons, 6 seasons now, all that has to come into fruition. If we're bringing God into it, those are the threads I want to know why he's here and whether he has put all this in play. Is Lucifer coming to Earth his own choice? Is it something that Michael has deemed? Is it something that Michael did because God ordered him? These are the things, these higher powers, these higher manipulations, I think is more at play here than just the free will that they've all been experiencing. So that's sort of where I'm really curious to see how that all plays out in the next end of the season.
Okay. I agree with you. I'd like to find those things out as well. Lisa.
Well, once the big man came down, I mean, that was just like goosebump moment. I was like, and then that was the end. I was like, oh no. And he said, I hate when my children fight. And I just went, oh my gosh. So I definitely want to know why now. I agree with you guys. Why now? Like, what is it about now? Like, did he put the plan in motion? Like, does he know Michael's plan? Is Michael going rogue from the plan that he was given? That's the number one thing I want to see. But another thing that I'm really curious about, and I'd like to see more of, I mean, Aminadiel as a dad has been so fun to watch. He's been amazing, but I thought it was strange that Charlie only stops crying when he sees Lucifer's real face.
Right.
So I'm starting to think, does Charlie, and then they said, since he was sick and he had a cold, that means he's human, but does Charlie have any powers?
Well, he's
Charlie,
a Nephilim, yeah.
And is
we
he
don't
part of God's
know.
plan?
Is he part of God's plan as well? And
Yeah.
then, so I want to see more of that. And Dan, I'm interested to see. I mean, I just feel like Dan needs to go talk to Dr. Linda. I mean, he needs some therapy at this point. Oh my gosh. Dan is just in a bad place. And Kevin Alejandro, he does such a great job with all the emotions and the craziness, the chaos from the, Fitbit excitement at the beginning to, crying his eyes out, begging how much he missed Charlotte. That was heartbreaking.
Oh,
and then seeing Lucifer's face, he has really gone through it this season so far. So I'm curious to see what else they're going to put him through.
What else
I hope it's therapy.
Have him be, he's still standing, but.
Right.
I'm sorry. I thought.
No, I mean, just thinking about it, it's like, what else but it is Lucifer. Anything can happen. But I definitely want to see where they go with his character. And I hope Maze comes to her senses and comes back to Team Lucifer.
Oh, I think it'll happen eventually.
I hope so.
How much havoc she wreaks in the meantime, but yeah.
Yeah.
Marie.
Okay, I have not read the comic book, so I'm just going based on plot.
No, we're just doing the show.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Spoilers from the comics now.
But the show, to me, has always been about redemption and the many forms it takes. So I think that what we are going to see is overall redemption of the individuals. And what form that takes, I have no idea. I strongly suspect Ella will come back to her faith. I strongly suspect Kevin will, not Kevin, but I strongly suspect Dan will find peace and maybe sacrifice, because remember, he was bad in the opening things. He was the dad who was corrupt and who Chloe separated from because she didn't want her child to be raised in that environment. She couldn't say bad things about him, but she could remove Chloe from his influence. So, you've got to have the redemption. And of course, the redemption of Lucifer through the power of love instead of desire, because that has always been part of the dynamic there. Love, desire, love, desire. The thing that worries me, and just again, looking at plot mechanics. Okay, Dad shows up. What that says to me, especially with this theme of human injustice going through, Okay, guys, we're going to have end times here. Charlie's over there, and we just have to pick out an Antichrist. And I'm hoping they don't do that because they originally planned for this one to be their end season. And that would mean we have to go through one of these blank, blank, blank celestial battles, like something out of Bleach, for the next 16 episodes. And I really just don't want to deal with that. I want to get to the people part, not the
Right.
not the Shakespearean battle
struggle,
scenes. Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, the,
Yeah.
well, the
so,
show has always been about character, so I'm hoping they don't go that route.
yeah,
I
that's
hope
what
so,
I'm
too.
hoping.
Yeah.
Kevin. And then we have some comments from the audience, but I'd like to hear Kevin's thoughts first.
I've got a smaller picture and a bigger picture to quickly cover.
Okay.
Number one, as many of us have been talking about, and several folks in the comments too, I want to see Maze come to the realization that she doesn't need quote unquote a soul.
Mhm.
She's, whether it's a soul mate or whether she chooses to go it herself alone, but that she realizes she can control her own fate without that. I mean, that'd be a great character thing for her to pull. So I want to see her get that opportunity and not just being the, if you will, a little bit of the play thing to put between Michael and Lucifer.
I'm wondering if the soul that she's looking for is a soulmate, that is the piece of the soul she's missing. That when she finds that person that she wants to spend the rest of her eternity with, that's her soul. She doesn't need a soul herself to be put in, but she's going to find a soul companion, perhaps.
Or that's what she thinks anyway.
Yeah. No. Well, and then that's part of what she's been doing is she's not sure sometimes what she wants. She hears people saying you need to have a soulmate, so now that's what she searches for.
Right.
Maybe this happiness is already inside her, and that's part of her discovery. I'm kind of hoping. We'll see. I think they'll take us in that direction. As Jean Marie said, or Susan, so did you. I mean, this is about the characters. We want to see what each of them does on their journey. So the bigger picture thing, as we've all touched on, with Dad showing up halfway through what was planned to be the final season, it does seem like it might be one of these, okay, I've seen enough with what Lucifer's tried to do. Michael, you've brought in so much doubt in these humans. We need to find out if these humans are worth it. And kind of a, okay, boys, you both have to stand back and we're going to find out if the humans can take care of themselves kind of deal, maybe, to give us some chance of character growth and for the team to come together on some other big potential apocalypse that they have to avoid.
I hadn't thought that's a great comment.
Now, and yeah, I mean, that's that would be kind of awkward if that was going to be what was happening this season, as you were saying, you know, planned to be the last. And I'm trying to remember, I don't think they were done with this season yet. I mean, filming it when they knew they were getting a 6, or they maybe before it was finalized, but they knew it was in the works. I think I'm pretty sure they were still working on this one. Kevin, do you remember?
I think they even still have a little bit left to film, so there's enough wiggle room that they can adjust it. But I'm just wondering.
Right. They could redo some things, but you're right. I mean,
It's always tough to know if that was planned. We'll have to wait to see.
Oh, there's Susan. Hi, Susan.
Sorry about that. Internet's just having an issue tonight.
Believe me, I understand. I'm just glad we haven't had rain in about a week, and it's like, oh, good, no storm.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
But this is we had this nice comment that maybe Lilith is Hell's new warden. Well, that's kind of an interesting idea.
I like that.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then this was another one that I found kind of intriguing. That the end game is for Chloe to get Lilith some immortality. And Lucifer and Chloe, that's how they could end up together. Because one of you had mentioned, that would be kind of a little bit of an issue if you've got somebody who's basically unkillable and is always going to be around, versus somebody who can't. But then Victoria follows up and says that as much as she wants Chloe and Lucifer to be endgame, I don't want her to gain immortality. And then she goes on to say in a different comment that she doesn't see her leaving Trixie or even Dan, as Trixie's dad, I suppose, behind. So those are some I mean, there are all kinds of things that we could speculate on in terms of where they're going. The fact that we can speculate, the fact that we enjoy getting together and discussing these things, and that, you know, to me, that's good television. I mean, when it,
Mhm.
you know,
Yes.
when you talk about a show for an hour, as we have been, then, you know, I think that you sort of have to trust that they're going to do something right. I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, you know, we're invested. Yeah. So
Well, we know the ring is in play.
we know the ring. What?
You know, we know that the ring is. We know the ring is in play. We know that
Right.
Lilith's
Right.
immortality is there. So we know it has to come into play at some point. How it does that, whether it's, you know, one of a character's about near death and they use the ring to bring her back, and then, you know, who knows where it's going to come, you know, which way it's going to go. But we do know that it's an element that's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think all of us are going to make sure we're along for the ride. Correct?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all in for it. Have been since I first saw it. I know
Yeah.
all of you are as well, and I'm guessing that our viewers feel the same way. I don't know. You know, some people may not have caught the show until it got to Netflix, and you know, but you know, it's been on long enough that it certainly has taken the world by storm. That's for sure. So Fox might be sorry now, right? Uh, in any case, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I want to thank our viewers who have come in and participated. And even if you didn't participate in terms of making a comment, that you came and watched, and we appreciate that very much. And of course, people can always watch this later. It will be on the Urban Fantasy Track YouTube channel for in perpetuity, however long that may be. And it is 2020, so we have to make those qualifications. But I want to thank all of you. You've been a great panel, and I appreciate it so much. I'll give you a hand, because even though we're not in person, I can do that. And anyway, thank you very much to everyone. Thank you to all of my panelists. It's been a great deal of fun, and I hope you guys had as much fun as I did.
No, we did.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Carol.
Our
Thank you,
pleasure.
Thank you
Carol.
for doing this,
Guys.
really.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
I miss seeing you guys in person.
I know.
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah.
I miss y'all.
2021.
Yes.
But yeah.
Virtual hugs.
That's right.
Virtual hugs.
Thank you so much.
Take care, all.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.